Undersecretary Ora Zeya was Senate confirmed and sworn in Undersecretary for Civilian Security, Democracy, and Human Rights on July 14, 2021. On this role, she leads the global diplomatic efforts to strengthen democracy, advance universal human rights, support refugee and humanitarian relief, promote rule of law and counter narcotic cooperation, fight corruption and intolerance, prevent armed conflict, and eliminate human trafficking. And she is also special coordinator of Tibetan issues, for which she led U.S. effort to support the human rights and meet the humanitarian needs for the Tibetan people and preserve their unique cultural, religious, and linguistic identity. Undersecretary Zeya brings these roles over 3 decades of diplomatic and leadership achievement and in protection of international peace, security, and human rights. She is currently a commissioner of the Congressional Executive Committee on China and ex-official member of the U.S. Institute of Peace Board of Directors. Please give applause. Welcome to Undersecretary Ora Zeya.
Good morning, and thank you for that warm introduction. I'd first like to thank the Vietnam Human Rights Day Advisory Board for helping organize today's events. I'd like to thank our distinguished moderator and speakers for providing their insights on this vitally important issue. Of course, I want to thank Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick for sponsoring this year's commemoration. Thank you all. Distinguished senators and members of Congress, friends and colleagues, it is an honor to be with you all today to mark the 30th commemoration of Vietnam Human Rights Day. On this anniversary, we have an opportunity to reflect on the decades of work and tireless efforts of courageous champions, including many in attendance today, to advance human rights in Vietnam. I want to salute Dr. Nguyen Nguyen and Dr. Nguyen Van Huê in particular, and countless other human rights defenders, ethnic minority and religious freedom advocates, and members of civil society who for decades have called upon the government of Vietnam to promote and protect human rights and fundamental freedoms. I commend you for your unwavering leadership and dedication to these critically important issues. Thank you all. For our part, the United States is committed to a world in which human rights are protected, human rights defenders are celebrated, and those who commit human rights abuses are held accountable. Under the Biden-Harris administration, the United States has pursued a foreign policy that unites our democratic values with our diplomatic leadership and is centered on the defense of democracy and protection of human rights. As you know, this past year was significant for the U.S.-Vietnam relationship. In September of 2023, President Biden and Secretary Blinken visited Vietnam and announced an upgrade in our bilateral relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. And while we seek to deepen our economic partnership and our people-to-people ties with Vietnam so we can work together to address global challenges, this engagement remains guided by democratic values and the protection of human rights. In fact, one of the core pillars of our comprehensive strategic partnership is promoting and protecting human rights. President Biden directly underscored during his visit last September the universality of human rights and the importance of our bilateral cooperation to advance human rights and fundamental freedoms, including freedoms of expression, association, peaceful assembly, and religion or belief at home and abroad. Secretary Blinken and our most senior leaders continue to reiterate this message, and our long-standing bilateral human rights dialogue is centered It's in that regard that the United States continues to have serious concerns about the state of human rights in Vietnam. The Department of State's recently released Human Rights Report on Vietnam documents a continued crackdown by authorities on human rights and fundamental freedoms, particularly freedom of expression. We continue to raise our concerns directly with the Vietnamese government, calling for reforms and integrating human rights across our bilateral relationship. So allow me to speak to 3 serious human rights concerns in Vietnam that we are particularly focused on. First, we are deeply concerned that Vietnam continues to impose severe limitations on freedom of expression, association, peaceful assembly, and freedom of religion or belief. This includes Vietnam's use of vague national security provisions to criminalize the exercise of fundamental freedoms. This, in turn, has led to a troubling number of cases of harassment, unjust arrests, and harsh prison sentences targeting human rights defenders, independent journalists, ethnic, minority, and religious freedom advocates, and everyday people who are peacefully expressing their views. We remain deeply concerned regarding the welfare of unjustly detained political prisoners like Pham Duan Chang, a journalist who remains in prison despite her reported deteriorating health. The work of Chang and other independent journalists is essential to building a prosperous and resilient society. They make invaluable contributions to accountability and transparency and give local communities a voice in addressing challenges like environmental pollution, corruption, and access to public resources. Chang's detention is not an isolated incident. Human rights organizations estimate that there are more than 180 unjustly detained political prisoners in Vietnam. So we continue to call on the government of Vietnam to release Chang and all other unjustly detained prisoners. We are also concerned that the government of Vietnam maintains significant control over religious practices, and that Vietnam's laws include vague provisions to restrict the exercise of religious freedom or belief in the stated interest of national security and social unity. Religious actors, particularly those representing groups without government recognition or certificates of registration, continue to report incidents of government harassment, including physical assaults, arrests, travel restrictions, and property seizure and destruction. As many of you know, Secretary Blinken redesignated Vietnam as a special watch list country for engaging in or tolerating severe violations of religious freedom under the International Religious Freedom Act in December 2023. To avoid another special watch list designation, Vietnam must take significant and lasting actions to improve the status of religious freedom for all. The United States will continue to press Vietnam on this issue and urge respect for the rule of law and the rights of individuals to exercise freedoms of expression, association, peaceful assembly, and religion or belief. Second, we remain concerned that civic space and the ability for non-governmental organizations to operate are highly constrained, both in law and practice. NGOs play a critical role in supporting government efforts to address pressing social problems, filling gaps in service provision, and promoting civic engagement, including by marginalized ethnic minority and religious groups. This is why it's especially concerning that at least 6 prominent environmental defenders and non-governmental organization leaders have been convicted of tax evasion since 2021. These convictions have left many other NGO leaders afraid that they might be targeted next. The trials of Hoang Thi Minh Hong, Dam Dinh Bach, and other environmental defenders raise serious concerns about about respect for fair trial guarantees and other human rights. Having NGOs at the table and operating without fear of retaliation or retribution is not only a commitment Vietnam made under the Just Energy Transition Partnership, but it is a pledge that both our countries have made as members of the UN Human Rights Councils. So we will continue to call on Vietnam to create an enabling environment for NGOs to operate and contribute to their nation's development, including by releasing unjustly detained NGO leaders. Thirdly, I am deeply troubled by Vietnam authorities' efforts to reach beyond their borders, to coerce, harass, intimidate, surveil, and censor human rights defenders, independent journalists, and others for exercising their rights. Such actions undermine Vietnam's commitment to a rules-based international order and respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. The alleged forced return of Vietnamese blogger and political refugee Quang Van Thai, who was reportedly abducted by Vietnamese authorities in April 2023 while living in exile in Thailand, is but one of the most recent examples of transnational repression reported. I know that many of you here have also had harrowing experiences with transnational repression and continue to contend with the far-reaching negative consequences of that on your lives and also those of your colleagues and family members. I assure you that the United States will continue to push back against governments that arbitrarily and unlawfully surveil, threaten, and attack individuals, both at home and abroad, who are exercising their universal human rights. The United States stands with and supports those targeted by acts of transnational repression, and we are committed to promoting accountability for its perpetrators. Finally, as we continue to press Vietnam to address these serious human rights concerns, we're also actively encouraging the government to deepen progress that we've seen in recent years to improve the protection of women, persons with disabilities, and LGBTQI+ persons, as well as strengthen labor rights. As a member of the United Nations, we call upon Vietnam, as we do all countries, to uphold its obligations on human rights and to actively work to promote and protect these rights at home and abroad. I want to close again by drawing attention to the long-standing dedication and bravery of Vietnam's human rights defenders and civil society leaders for their continued work to advance human rights and fundamental freedoms, despite the significant risks and threats they face. What gives me hope for an improved state of human rights is the resilience, the perseverance, and the ongoing leadership of those in this room and other members of civil society, both inside and outside Vietnam and among the diaspora. Your resolve is an inspiration, and the United States will always stand behind those who work towards a more just, free, and equitable Vietnam.